Deep down, we're all social creatures. That need for connection, it's literally woven into our DNA. It's as essential as food or water. But in this world we live in, this super hyper-connected world, we're somehow getting more and more isolated. So what happens when that genuine connection starts to fade? Well, a whole economy has popped up to sell it right back to us. Today, we're going to dive into the rise of the loneliness economy.
And this isn't some new idea. I mean, we're talking over 2,000 years ago. The philosopher Aristotle knew this. He didn't see friendship as a nice to have, a luxury. Nope, for him it was a basic requirement for a good life. It's a truth that feels so obvious, right? But the question is, how does that ancient wisdom stack up against what we're dealing with today? Okay, and here is where things get, well, pretty jarring. Modern research has actually put a number on what that absence of connection costs us. And it's a startling number. Multiple studies have found that being socially disconnected can have the exact same impact on your mortality as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And let's be clear, that's not a metaphor. That's a real, measurable physical toll that isolation takes on our bodies. So, the health risks are definitely real, but it's not quite that simple. Some researchers, like the folks over at Our World in Data, are actually pushing back on the term loneliness epidemic. They argue that framing it that way can be kind of unhelpful. So, keeping that in mind, let's try to figure out what's really going on with the nature of our connections. And that really gets us to the heart of the matter. It's not just about how many friends we have, but about how the very quality, the actual definition of friendship, is being twisted and reshaped in our modern world. To really get a handle on this shift, let's go back to our friend Aristotle. He had this idea that friendships exist on a spectrum. On one end, you've got what he called instrumental friendships, basically relationships built on what's useful. And on the other end, you have disinterested friendships, the ones you value just because, for their own sake. And this breaks it down perfectly. A disinterested friend, they're irreplaceable. The whole point is just the bond itself. But an instrumental friendship, that's a means to an end. It could be for work, for fun, for status, and because of that, that person is, in theory, replaceable. One is about who you are when you're together, the other is about what you can get from each other. So the big question is, which one is our world pushing us toward? Well, that's where this huge modern force comes in, surveillance capitalism. This is the engine that runs so many of the digital platforms we live on. It works by grabbing all our data for free to predict and, control our behavior. And it has completely changed the game for how our friendships form and survive. And this system, it has some pretty direct consequences. The way social media platforms are built actually pushes us towards those instrumental relationships. We're encouraged to turn our friendships into numbers, followers, likes, making connection feel like a public performance of success. Researchers call it the bureaucratization of intimacy, which is a fancy way of saying we start managing our friends like they're contacts in a spreadsheet. And all this requires what's called effective labor, that nonstop work of liking, commenting, and sharing just to keep the connection on life support. So as we're shifting away from those deep, real connections and toward these managed, instrumental ones, it's created this void. And you know what they say about a void in the market, right? Something always rushes in to fill it. And boy, has it ever, building a massive industry in the process. And that's what we're calling the loneliness economy. Just this year, an analysis sized this whole market at $4.6 billion. But here's the kicker. It's growing at 14% every single year. This isn't just about a few lonely people. This is a massive, booming market built around our search for connection. So, what does this market actually sell? Well, first up, you've got the rise of AI companions. For a monthly fee, sometimes as much as $89 a month, you can basically subscribe to a friendship. You get personalized texts, simulated conversations 24/7. Then there's the market for actual, physical, but non-sexual touch. Professional cuddling services are a thing, and they can cost you anywhere from $80 to over $250 an hour. This is a direct answer to what psychologists sometimes call skin hunger, that deep biological need for human contact that for a lot of people just isn't being met. And hey, it's not all super niche stuff like that. The economy is adapting in much more mainstream ways. The restaurant industry, for example, has seen a huge boom in solo dining. Places are now actively designing and marketing the experience of eating alone, making it comfortable, even something to celebrate. Okay, so all of this brings us to the really tricky question, the big one. Are all these products and services a real solution to loneliness, or are they just a new, clever way to profit from it? Let's just ask it plainly. Are these services actually solving loneliness, or are they just monetizing it? I mean, when someone is feeling vulnerable, when they're driven by the pain of being isolated, that line between helping them and exploiting them gets really, really blurry. So, how do we tell the difference? Well, some analysts have this really useful framework that helps sort it all out. They break these products into three buckets. First, you've got connection substitutes, like an AI companion. They're designed to replace human connection, so the risk of just monetizing the problem is super high. Then you have connection facilitators, think community groups or hobby class. Their goal is to help you build real connections, so the risk is low. And finally, there are parallel experience products like streaming services or solo dining that just make being alone more comfortable. The risk there is kind of moderate. They might help you cope, or they might make being alone so easy that you stop trying to connect.
Which leads to a pretty simple but powerful ethical test you can use for any of these products. Just ask yourself this. If someone uses this thing a lot for a whole year, are they more likely or less likely to have real human relationships at the end of that year? The answer to that question tells you pretty much everything you need to know. It shows you if a product is a bridge to connection or if it's just a really comfortable cage. All right, so if the substitutes are risky, and what we really want are things that facilitate connection, where does that even happen? This brings us to a really powerful idea for how we can start to rebuild our social lives. The concept comes from a sociologist named Ray Oldenburg, and it's called the third place. The idea is simple. Your first place is home. Your second place is work. Your third place is somewhere else. It's those vital social spots, the coffee shops, the parks, the libraries, the local pubs, that act as the living rooms of our communities. They're where real, spontaneous, informal public life actually happens. And for these places to really work their magic, they have some key ingredients. A great third place is open and welcoming. You don't need a special invitation. It's comfortable, it's informal. The main thing people do there is just talk. You see the same faces, the regulars, which creates that feeling of belonging. And maybe most importantly, the vibe is lighthearted. It's a low-stakes, low-pressure place where we can just practice being around other people. So as we wrap this all up, that's really the big idea I want to leave you with. In a world that's busy selling us digital substitutes and cashing in on our isolation, the real antidote might not be a product we buy at all, but a place we can go. And that leaves us with a question that isn't just for society to figure out, but for every single one of us to think about. Where is your third place?